All right, I'm going to move on and change direction now to Neptune. So Neptune takes 160 years to get around. So it's in a sign 12. This one looks like it's in there for 14 years. Neptune's in Pisces. It's its own sign. So Pisces is water, it's mutable, it's adaptable. It's the water sign that's the last sign. It's about merging. It's really about unity consciousness, but also difficulty with boundaries and Neptune is like special in Pisces. So every degree that it goes, as it's going from February 4th, 2012 till January 27, 2026, Neptune is taking each degree and waking that degree up and offering its gifts to that, offering its blessings. So when you have any planets in Pisces, then Neptune is offering its blessings, which it only does every 160 years. So what's happening this spring is that, and we're already in spring, right now, Jupiter and Neptune are conjunct. And Jupiter is another planet that has a strong affinity for Pisces. It likes being in Pisces. In Vedic astrology, it rules Pisces, but we're not talking about that right now. So we're sticking to Western for the moment. But Jupiter and Neptune, Jupiter expands whatever it's doing. It just brings it out into the light. It's a very bright planet. So Neptune being invisible while it's in Pisces can lay dormant. It's kind of in the invisible realms. So it can be, it usually creates a sense of confusion, disorientation. Neptune and Pluto both together rule plagues, and Neptune, because it spreads things. It's like where things are more likely to spread, misinformation or whatever, somebody else's perspective on reality, or germs or thoughts. So we look for inner planets to trigger this, both for Pluto and for Neptune. And Jupiter is a very bright planet, and when it conjuncts Neptune, it brings all the work of Neptune out, particularly all the work it's been doing since 2012. So there's a light being shown on the underlying dynamics, particularly relational dynamics, emotional dynamics, things around what we believe. Neptune rules that. And then at the end of April, Venus will be conjunct Neptune. And so the two brightest planets in the sky are Venus and Jupiter, and they'll be conjunct Neptune. And these are the three planets of love. These are planets that are all about how do we open our hearts? How do we share with each other? How do we support each other? These are planets that want us to be in connection. So in a way, this is a very lovely transit, however ungrounded it may be, that it happens during an eclipse. So the eclipse is April 29th at the end of this month. So we're heading into eclipse time now. August, why do you keep saying August? April 15th will be the full moon that introduces us into the eclipse time. And so we'll be in eclipse energy from April 15th all the way to the end of May. There's two eclipses. There's one on May 15th and one on April 29th. And eclipses can destabilize things. Now, the eclipses we had in January 2020, those were particularly intense because they were triggering Saturn and Pluto conjunct. So we've already kind of talked about how intense Saturn and Pluto can be. Think 9/11. And obviously the beginning of the pandemic and among other things that were happening then. But this eclipse is different. This eclipse is, it's being triggered by Uranus, which is kind of a wake up and smell the coffee planet. It's it gets us alive. It wants us to get energized, get excited, but it can also bring on anxiety and fear. So we have this Venus, Jupiter, Neptune, which we could be using to really celebrate each other, to feel love, to feel like opening. This is a great time for love. It's a great time to meet someone. It's a great time to kind of to share appreciation and gratitude. I mean, it's always good to do that. But so as we're doing, as that's happening, then we have an eclipse that's kind of destabilizing. So this piece about alternate realities, how we perceive reality, what we resonate, like how do we keep creating the realities that we're in? What are the belief systems that are underlying it? These are questions that we can ask and answer during this time period. These are questions that we can come to the surface with. I think it's interesting that the moment of the Academy Awards has like really introduced a lot of conversations. I've read so many great articles just about what is violence, what's the Academy Awards, should we even be having the Academy Awards? Like questions about like, you know, what are all the underlying assumptions that we have? And, you know, it was like a one moment in the middle of many moments, and it just kind of like snapped us out, just like Uranus does. It just kind of like slaps us awake, like wake up. And there's a sense of like, I mean, in some ways it personifies the whole thing really beautifully, because Venus and Jupiter and Neptune are all very much like glamour and glitz and acting and let's pretend to be someone else, and you know, let's look beautiful, and let's dress up. And then there's Uranus in the eclipse, and it's like, boom, this is not real. Here's what's real, you know, here are the assumptions and underlying things that we're thinking about that we have to snap out of, because Pluto's in extreme declination is coming. The revolutions are coming, the changes are coming. And we've got to kind of snap out of the illusions that we're in, that we're co-creating, that are doing disservice to ourselves, you know, having these unrealistic ideas about what's attractive, having unrealistic ideas about, I want to say what suffering is. Like there's different perspectives on, and I've talked about this also in the past, about suffering and the difference between obstacles and oppression. What's real oppression and what's an obstacle? When are we dealing with something that we can overcome? When are we getting taken down by the difficulties in life? And when are we just in the soup of these belief systems that we have in our culture throughout the world that are really creating suffering for many people? Beliefs in war. Like here's this whole idea that that war is noble, that there's any kind of justification for war, and there's still a deep belief system in the world that somehow people fought and died so that we could be free. This is a belief that I don't necessarily believe. I don't think somebody fought so that I could be free. I think somebody woke up, somebody experienced their life, somebody didn't die so that I could be free. And as long as we have this belief that other people have to die so that we can be free, or other people have to go to war so that we can be free, then we continually perpetuate war. And the United States in particular, when the Soviet Union came down in the 1980s and 1990s, Gorbachev was this brilliant leader who was, well, maybe had his faults and stuff. I'm not going to say that he was that great, but he was willing to open the doors. He was willing to do something very radical at the time. Here was a country that was suffering, and he was willing to say, okay, let's stop this. You know, talk about a reality shift. Now all of a sudden, these people that were, remember like Nureyev defecting? He was this dancer that I went to see in New York City, and it was just like a big deal to be Russian and to defect. And then they opened the policies, they opened the door, they split up into all these different countries. Ukraine split off, and Ukraine became Ukraine, separate from the Soviet Union in 1991. And here's this country that now is completely split apart, but the United States didn't take them off our most wanted list. We didn't like say, okay, Russia's a different country now. They don't have the arsenal and the weapons and the economy that we have. we kept the Cold War perpetuated. We kept believing they were the enemy, and we've continued to hold them in that box of the enemy, where I don't know, from what I understand, they don't have anywhere near the resources that we have. So why are they still like the evil empire? Part of it is they're acting out the role that they've been forced to play through this NATO alliance. Like, okay, now we're going to get all the other countries to kind of gang up on this, wounded. So naturally, this wounded country that naturally had to respond with another kind of tyrant coming in. They had to respond with somebody who could respond to the threats that were happening to them. So anyway, that's my take on Russia. I think I've got a slide about Russia in here. Okay. Here's my brief Russian history lesson. So Russia's like when you look at Chinese history, you have to like go back like 10, 12, 18 of these sine waves, and you see dynasty after dynasty. But Russia, the Mongols, and this was like, so prior to this cycle was the time of Genghis Khan and the Mongols kind of encroaching into Russia. And so what Russia was at this point in time was more like a province around Moscow. So there was Ivan the First and Ivan the Second. They were both like leaders of Moscow. And then you get to this point here, 1494, when Columbus is kind of raping and pillaging the Americas. Ivan comes in, and he's the Ivan the Great, the one that kicked out the Mongols and started like Russia as a country. And then this Ivan is Ivan the Terrible, who gets this really bad reputation, right? We all think he was like this horrible person, but from what I can read, he really took down the noble people. Like, he instituted a lot of reforms, and I think he doesn't necessarily deserve the reputation he gets. So then 1613 comes along, and there's a new dynasty, the Romanov dynasty comes in, which is pretty much lasts all the way until the Russian Revolution down here. And so the last time Pluto's an extreme declination, 1700, this was Peter the Great and his expansion into Sweden, Finland, Sweden, expanding the empire. And then they had a bunch of women rulers, Anna, Elizabeth, and Catherine the Great. And while we're in revolution, and France is in revolution, and there's other countries in revolution during this time period, Catherine the Great instituted a lot of reforms. Now, she wasn't she's a mixed bag too. Both of these guys are mixed bags. They were doing enough reforms so that there weren't the major uprisings that were happening elsewhere around the world. And really, seriously, I've read quite a few books on Catherine the Great, and everyone's got a different take on her. But anyway, going on, we get to 1863, the beginning of this cycle. And the beginning is always kind of the seed thoughts, the seed ideas. What's this cycle going to be about? Like, somebody starts talking about it. So what started in, I think it was exactly 1863, was Alexander II was the Tsar, and he instituted the Emancipation Reform, which freed the serfs. Now, again, they were moving into capitalism, even if they were moving into communism. So it wound up being a lot of taxes, not very good for the peasants, even though there was this idea of emancipation of the peasants, the same year that of the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States. So then they had this really nasty revolution right around the time of World War I. And then that moved into Stalin, and there was a Stalin years, and then we have Gorbachev here. And then Yeltsin, and then Putin. And Putin's not going to last that much longer. I think once we get to 2026, I don't think he can stay in. He's still kind of a young guy for how long he's been in power, but I think this is heading towards revolution, particularly given when you look at this cycle and you think about Russia. these are people who have lived through really intense stuff. And in the United States, we haven't lived through anything. I mean, we've been protected since 1863. There hasn't been like war on our home soil. But these are people that are used to like real revolution. 1918, there's probably some people alive today who, maybe not that many, but a few. And there's certainly a lot of people who remember Stalin. And there's certainly many, many people who remember the fall of the Soviet Union. And so I kind of think that I've been tracking, there's some major revolutions, and maybe revolution is not quite the right word, protest is the word, that people are really protesting and rising up in the streets, and they have been over the last 10 years in Russia. And they're not going to sit still through this. They may be getting misinformed just like everyone else, but just like every other time, there's ways that we get connected. There's ways that we come together. There's ways that the shift in reality happens. So I don't think he stays. I think I've got his chart if we want to look at it. Is this it? Somewhere in here. Yeah, you know what? I'm not ready to go there. I don't know if we really want to look that deep into him. Let's go back to Neptune. So eclipses now, there's a certain like perception, what's real, what's not real. Venus is going to really help us like see where's the love, where's the passion, where do we really want to get plugged in? Because I think that's the real question. Where are you going to get plugged into the conversation? What's the topic you're going to take on? Where's your voice in the world right now? What do you want to have happen? What's the most important thing to you? What are you going to get behind? What are you going to be what are you going to be doing? How are you going to be creating the conversation? I mean, think about this. I want to go back to the Reformation again and the printing press. So at the same time, when the printing press was first developed by Gutenberg, which was already developed in China like centuries before. But when Gutenberg started the printing press, it was like 5 years later when there were multiple printers, and then 10 years, 20 years later, like this took off, the printing press took off massively. So that by the time, a couple of decades later, when Martin Luther was writing, he was able to just like print off pamphlet after pamphlet after pamphlet, and his word was able to get out. It correlates, the printing press correlates with the exact time period as the computer and Alan Turing's computer. It's the same exact year in this Pluto cycle. So now we're just figuring out what to do with the computer. We're just figuring out what to do with the internet. So, there's been people littering us with their stuff. And it's just like, think about the Reformation and all these like books and pamphlets. I mean, what happened was everyone became literate. So it went from like, I don't know, low literacy to high literacy in a matter of decades. And that's what's happening here, from people not understanding how to use the computer to pretty much everyone of us, and maybe some of us not as much as others, knowing how to use PowerPoint and Zoom and get hooked into Wi-Fi and check our Facebook and Twitter accounts. And like, we all know how to do this now. And so it's our computer literacy. And now we get to be more discriminating. When it came to the Reformation, it was like, okay, I don't need to read every pamphlet that comes my way, everything I find in the streets. I can be more discerning at that time. And I can decide, am I going to follow, like, who am I going to follow? What am I going to believe? What movement do I want to be part of? So that's what we're doing. All right. Let's get to the next planet, Uranus. So Uranus is in Taurus, 2018 to 2025. Now, Taurus is fixed Earth. So this is the densest planet. This is the most earthy, get your hands dirty sign. Sorry, the most dense sign. Uranus is probably one of the least dense planets. So here's this planet that's awakening, but it's about awakening the Earth. This is massively about climate change and how we deal with climate and how we deal with our resources. So it's time to look at what's in the Earth, oil. So everything that's going on in the Ukraine and Russia has so much to do with oil, and it's maybe escalating and quickening our getting off of oil, at least in Europe. I think there's this piece about how are we getting resourced? Uranus and Taurus is where are our resources? What's money? And it's kind of very volatile time period financially. So this is market shifts, and I don't, Uranus is still there, so we'll probably keep seeing more market shifts. I haven't been able to like tune into whether we're going to see a massive crash like 87 or 1929, but I think there's a sense of this consensus reality of stock market and how much it really correlates to actual jobs, actual GDP, actual income, actually what things cost. I think the correlation between the wealthiest and how they experience the economy and how most of us experience the economy, that disparity is getting more and more real. And I think that's Uranus and Taurus waking us up, and it's going to keep doing its work over the next couple of years. So right now it's at the midpoint. The midpoints are turning points. They're like the crest. They're like Uranus is like doing its work, trying to break us through. And now it's like, this is a breakthrough moment. So particularly when we have an eclipse at the end of this month, conjunct Uranus, it's a big breakthrough. It may be a pretty intense time period. And what I usually recommend for eclipses is just be clear about what you're doing. If you want to travel, I'm traveling in May. We'll see if that actually happens. But if you want to travel, just make sure you're traveling because you really feel called to do it. Like for me, it's a big family reunion. I'll see all my brothers for the first time all together in a long time. So it just felt like everything like fell together really quickly. And I was like, okay, I know it's an eclipse, but everything's like happening really easily. So I'm going to go with it. I usually just try not to plan too much during that time period so that I can adapt. I can be in the flow. I can, just kind of respond to the things that go on in that time. All right. And then we have June, July, August. These are months where everything's moving forward. Let's see, what's my next slide here? Chiron. Chiron's in Aries. This is a lot about new developments and healing, new ways of Chiron in Aries. Chiron's the planet of the healing, the wounded healer. So we're seeing obviously new methods of healing and new ideas about how to heal. So this is really just starting, right? February 2019. So we're at the midway point of it. So it'll be interesting to see the new therapies that come out. I really recommend tuning into alternative therapies. That's kind of where my orientation is. So acupuncture, energy workers. I mean, the energy workers now may really be doing psychic surgery. Like there's like major breakthroughs that are happening this way. So this is important to tune into all the kinds of things that are happening that are tuning into our energy bodies, things that are outside of the third and fourth dimensions, that are tuning into the fifth and sixth and seventh dimensions. So, and then Saturn. And one of the reasons I just wanted to presence one of the shifts is that Saturn's in Aquarius now until March, and then it'll move into Pisces, and it'll be in Pisces 2023 to February 2026. And February 2026, it moves into Aries. Now, remember what we saw back here? Neptune moves into Aries in January 2026, same time as Saturn moves into Aries. I mean, this is pretty amazing that these two planets are moving into Aries, the 0 degree point of the zodiac, really in the same month. And so they're both shifting out of Pisces into Aries. So we're going to see a lot of new things, a lot of beginnings at this time period. And from now until then, there just needs to be some things that need to fall apart, and just looking at that as an okay thing. It's okay for us to watch things fall apart. It's okay. Like, we're okay. Some, it depends on our own personal karma, of course. Not everything's going to be okay for everyone, but tuning into what your purpose is, where do you belong? It's still time to make adjustments. Do you need to move? Do you need to change your career? Do you need to shift? Where do you want to be? You can see, like, is the environment that you're in now, is it still the same environment you want to be in 2 years from now, 3 years from now? Just allow things in your life to fall away. It's not, oftentimes these things are just like really getting us to see what needs to get born, because this is a big birth moment. Saturn and Neptune moving into Aries the same time that Pluto goes into extreme declination. Uranus, Uranus will be also changing signs. It'll be moving into Gemini. So we'll have these, we'll have multiple planets changing signs all around the same time period, 2026. And so we're looking at kind of things somewhat like getting shaken up, and then the real reforms, then the real new things. And I think these movements that are happening now, and let's go on to, okay, so here we go. The movements that are happening now, and by the way, these glyphs are Bradley Narragan's gifts. I just want to give a shout out to Bradley. He does really beautiful artwork. So the right now is like Neptune's finishing its time in Pisces and Pluto's finishing its time in Capricorn. We're like a reality that's been true for the last 10 years is coming to an end. We're starting to see the breakdowns in that. Let's see what comes after this. Oh, I just wanted to also acknowledge that Saturn, so Neptune, Saturn, they'll conjunct February 20th, 2026 at 0 degrees Aries, 44 minutes. And the last time they were conjunct was 1989, which was when Pluto was at 0 degrees declination at that justice point. So the Neptune-Saturn cycle is holding us in between kind of one important Pluto moment to another important Pluto moment. And we're in this year, the final kind of semi-sextile phase of that relationship between Saturn and Neptune. So we're really coming into the finishing of things that started in 1989. What started in 1989? Perestroika, glasnost, Soviet Union falling apart. So this is why we're seeing this question: what is the Soviet? What are those countries? What are the boundaries? Where do they need to be? What's supposed to happen there? These deeper questions about it. The one thing I really don't think is that we're moving into World War III. I just don't see it. I could be wrong, but I'm not worried about it. It just feels like it's way beyond what I think is really going on. I think things are falling apart. I think these questions and these actions that are being taken against Putin and against the Russian people, and these things are going to have repercussions. And it's not World War III. I can't imagine, like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me that that's what it's moving towards. So let's see. All right, so then, all right, I need to wind up. So the last thing I want to say and bring up has to do with, I brought this up last time, but I really want to kind of presence it again. August, September, we do have some squares going on, but these are not necessarily extraordinary things. June, July, August are really good months if you want to make plans, if you want to go do something, you want to travel, buy a house, start a new job. July, and August are just really awesome months for that. September, there's a Mercury retrograde, so just a heads up around that. It does square Neptune, so it means that things don't happen as solidly. And it's also kind of close to October. And then October, right at the end of October, it's really seems like a very intense time. We have a solar eclipse, and then Mars goes retrograde. And Mars goes retrograde in Gemini, and it's squaring Neptune while it's retrograde. It's really activating. It's going through that part of the constellation of Orion, like really activating volatility. So it happens at the time of year where often there are I think there's a report that comes out, a financial report that comes out in September or October that then often creates ruffles and difficulties in the stock market. So this could be a stock market shift that happens at the end of October. It's also during our election time. And it will be an election time that will be a month after Biden has entered his Saturn time period. So we'll probably see what's going on with Biden in September. He'll probably be fine until then. And then September, it could be Saturn just slows us down. So it could be him just getting slower, more tired. But he's got a pretty difficult Saturn, and he's had some really difficult things happen in his life that have been triggered by Saturn. So I think that there may be some real challenges, plus the election may be extremely intense and crazy. This Mars retrograde has me just kind of a little bit on, all right, what is this going to be? I also think because it's in Gemini, which is about communication, it could be cyber attacks. So if you need to get a new computer and you need to kind of set yourself up, I would do it in June, July, August, and then be backing up your systems, then really try to simplify your system so you don't have things to be too complex. You may want to really like change all your passwords in early October. You may just want to stay on top of that kind of stuff. You may want to kind of get hard copies, print out things like your bank statements and stuff like that in September, October. Just get ready for this system that we rely on for pretty much everything to have some glitches in November and December. It also can be stormy. Mars retrogrades people can just feel more frustrated, so they get more activated, they get a little more tense, they're more likely to fly off at the handle. So it can be a good time to not be traveling. It can be a good time to just be home or to plan on going one place and staying there for a little while. It could be another outbreak of the virus because it's Mars triggering Neptune. So it just looks like a pretty crazy winter. And if we're prepared for it, then we have our candles and we have a little heater unit set up, and we have, we just are prepared to kind of sink into that cozy winter time period, and just also know that it's just a couple of months. We come out of it. 2023 does happen. We get through it. For some of us, the Mars retrograde time will be good for our health. It can be good for it can be a good time to change our habits. It can be great for like clearing out your house, or kind of just clearing out old patterns. There's lots of great things that we can do during eclipse time and during Mars retrograde times that aren't about, I don't know, yelling at our neighbors or breaking our computers. It's like there's other ways to work with this. Mars is a planet of passion. It wants to trigger things. It wants to trigger us, get us motivated. I mean, the things that happen in October may be very motivating. It may be a winter where we're actually in the streets. It may be a winter where we figure out how to actually protest together in a way that creates effective change. I mean, there's lots of different ways. Plus, when Mars is retrograde, it's also opposite the galactic center. So it's also bringing in lots of new information, new light, new understanding about things. We may have a radical transformation on our perception of what our physical bodies are doing, the environment. There may be inventions that start coming out. So yeah, that's that. All right, so I'm going to end the recording here, and